defined so much by the technology that it certainly, certainly motion capture is a big part of it these days. But I wanted to kind of take us back just a little bit into just elements to define virtual worlds, and there's been a lot of studies and a lot of papers written, but um, what is it? Because if we look, I put just some defining elements here on the screen. Input, control, now dealing with haptics, and sensory feedback and other feedback to the user. But it's definitely experience. It's not a picture. There has to be space and time involved. So just looking at some of those issues, we can talk about that later on if there's time and if we like. Personal experience, and I've been working quite a bit on AI, artificial intelligence, in trying to create machines that learn, that I can actually talk to and that can recognize me and have a conversation. And that's been quite a learning experience. But what I wanted to kind of focus on just for my few minutes here is the way that I look at virtual worlds is I think perhaps different from the way a lot of people look at them, which is I'm an avid gamer. One thing that Richard, I think even Tom knows, is I believe I own the largest video game collection in the world. So that's what a fanatic I am about video games. I have hundreds of consoles, thousands of games. I have three storage spaces. And I've got every machine except the RDI Halcyon, made by Rick Dyer, and I think they only sold 3 in Ohio, something like that. So for me, that's a very immersive experience. I've also worked on a lot of games. I got my start in gaming, working on the PC and the Macintosh back in the early 1990s. So I definitely went through some of the pain that Richard went through. And Tom and I, as I mentioned, have been working together for about 18 years. And one thing that I wanted to point out again is that the way that we kind of define virtual worlds is something that you put on some sort of display or interface and you become immersed, you go through a training experience or some other experience. And the way I look at it is a little differently. I think we're actually living in a virtual world and that we are adapting very quickly to virtual technologies. As a clear example, there is personal motion capture systems for the home now, just like I really like the Microsoft Kinect. It certainly has its issues, but I can tell you my wife spends at least 2 hours a day exercising and interacting with it. She uses it more than I do. But when motion capture starts to enter the home, I would have never even predicted that 10 years ago. So what I look at is being more familiar with technology, the needs that technology can fulfill, and that eventually I fully expect us to live in a world where we can possibly transfer our personalities. We're certainly going to be able to control devices neurologically. I've been involved in some neurological studies with universities on a few different topics. But again, I've been fortunate to start out in video games. I moved quickly into film just by chance. It wasn't by design in any way, shape, or form. And I've been fortunate enough to be on the edge of technology, specifically motion capture technology. And one thing that I wanted to point out is, and I've got a bunch of slides here, I'll just go ahead and skip over these and get to some of the media stuff. But one thing I wanted to point out, and Tom will tell you this very clearly, I think Richard will tell you also, is that 10 years ago, if you said motion capture, it was a dirty word. Video games were beginning to embrace it, but still there was something about it that it was more, in my opinion, to do with the user than the technology, and in computing power as well, needed to be increased, and thus it has. And there's still a huge gap in the users of motion capture these days. Still, most people don't understand optics. They don't understand the frequency of light. They don't understand performance. They don't know how to aim cameras. I mean, there's a whole lot that can be expanded. But The nice thing that I've seen in the past decade especially is 10 years ago when I was promoting motion capture for The Matrix, I was getting the nastiest emails you can imagine. Now I'm getting calls saying, well, we don't see any other way to go other than motion capture on this, so we'd like you to do this, this, and this, and this. And the other interesting thing that has happened is entertainment was driving this first with video games and then motion pictures. And now I'm doing more work in simulation, medical simulation and training, and different other applications. So, uh, I kind of wanted to look at some of that, but I definitely want to look at the past and just kind of drive home the idea of what is virtual world. And I don't know how many people have been to the Hall of Presidents years ago, but that's what technology was 50, 60 years ago. And I remember as a kid when I sat down and watched the Hall of Presidents and Abraham Lincoln stand up and give the I believe it was the Gettysburg Address. I was pretty amazed. Was it a virtual world? It had a lot of the ingredients, but I'm not quite sure we were there yet. And of course, this is from some of my personal collection. Then we've got people like Nolan Bushnell and others who created some of the first video games. Has a lot of the same ingredients. Of course, Pong, which that's not the real Pong, I can tell you. This is my own personal collection. I'm such a fanatic. And then we can take it to, there's the first video game, the Magnavox Odyssey was created back in the early 70s. A dozen or so of those. Still fun to play. There's a picture of an Odyssey. There have been some interesting additions to technology that come and go that kind of just are a blip that pass. This is a simulation chair that I bought probably 12 years ago called the Rocket Ride, and I put a bass shaker in the bottom to get all the low bass frequencies, and I took the screen off the front and I put it in front of a projector. I mean, I've been trying to attain this for a long time, but there's some really bad language here, so maybe I should. What's that? Okay. Well, you might. This is what I could find of Andy when we were doing the MTV Video Awards. So there's some vulgar language, but it took us to kind of a whole new realm. But even during this time, we were dealing with, and let's see what should be something there. So we were dealing with real-time animations. You were dealing with Andy, and then this is Andy, on screen, so we could watch him on screen. But it wasn't that immersive. But yet our imaginations were such that we could, we could make sense of it. Pete could come in direct, and everybody was happy. So, I supervised the Two Towers as well as Return of the King, which was a real joy. Now, I do want to point out how far we've come since then, because this is the array of video monitors that we were using on a 52-camera setup just to capture Gollum at the time. We moved all of this to a single. We've got onboard computing on the cameras, but all the processors below, all the boxes below, that's been moved to the camera. Now we're into FPGA development, and we've got ARM processors, DSP processors on the cameras, and again, it's come a long way. But our main computer that we're doing all the real-time previs on is a single machine. That was, inconceivable just a decade ago. So it's moving leaps and bounds. And then, of course, we move on to Avatar, and I figure everybody's seen enough Avatar behind the scenes. I didn't need to go there. There's